The Small Business Administration is taking steps to ensure agencies hit the White House's equity goals. President Biden says he wants to increase the percentage of federal contracting dollars spent on small, disadvantaged businesses. Joe Jordan is CEO at Actuparo. He's former administrator of federal procurement policy. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So what percent of government contracts are currently reserved for small and minority-owned businesses, and what are the president's stated goals?
Sure. So 23% of all federal contracting dollars are intended to go to small businesses. Over the last about decade and a half, the government's done a great job increasing that. In the last year, it was about 26% of the dollars. And for small disadvantaged businesses, which is the closest proxy the federal government has to a minority-owned business, the goal is 5% of contracting dollars. The actual performance has been a little over 10%, so about double the goal in recent years. Or last year, that meant about $60 billion in federal prime contract awards went to these small disadvantaged businesses. And what President Biden is saying is, in an effort to increase the economic and financial outcomes in minority communities and other underserved communities, he'd like to see that 10+% performance increased by 50%, so up to 15%, which would drive about another $100 billion to small disadvantaged businesses over the next 5 years.
Joe, do you think that number is high enough?
Well, my thing is, I think all of the small business and socioeconomic small business programs are really great, SDB included. I think the tricky part is how you execute a admittedly laudable goal, like getting more dollars in the hands of these underserved communities. And so, as long as any increase to small disadvantaged businesses doesn't come out of the service-disabled veteran-owned small business program, which is about right now about half the dollar size of SDBs, or the women-owned small business program or the Hub Zone program, then sure. But in reality, experience has said that if you're really focused on one of those small business programs and not all of them in parity with each other, it can be a little bit of a crabs in a bucket scenario, and people are pulling each other down, and we really want to prevent that.
Well, you mentioned that the challenge is going to be in the execution. How should agencies execute? What's the best way to go about doing this in the right way?
Well, it will be a challenge for agencies, because the reality is, while there are a number of softer methods to increase minority business participation, such as training and education and entrepreneurial development, that brings more folks from these underserved communities into a business ownership situation where they can run companies and compete for federal contracts. In terms of really kind of hitting the goal, the one way is the 8A program, which is administered by the Small Business Administration and allows agencies to issue sole source contracts, so no bid contracts, as long as they're below certain thresholds. And that threshold for an individual business is about $4 million. And so what agencies are more likely to do is increasingly use tribally owned entities and Alaska Native corporations who have a much higher sole source threshold. And, that's not exactly what the administration is trying to do here. And so it will be a challenge for agencies. And I really look forward to seeing how SBA and OMB promulgate policies and regulations that give them more tools to achieve this goal.
And what about on the other side? What about, minority and disadvantaged businesses? What do they need to do to kind of get spun up and take advantage of this opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. A big piece of kind of the puzzle, I think. There are a number of absolutely free resources that minority business owners can take advantage of through the SBA and local affiliates that allow them to get the counseling, training, education, et cetera, to put them in a position to successfully start, run, and compete for contracts through their business. The other thing is this program is about business ownership, not employees. So, as long as it's owned and controlled by a qualified person, then all the dollars that flow to them through federal contracts count as going kind of to minority-owned businesses, even though many slash the majority slash all of the employees may not be in that socioeconomic group. And so that's another part of it is, for individuals to avail themselves of the economic programs that SBA and other agencies like Commerce offer to help them with training and education and put them in a position for maybe they're not ready to run a federal contractor, but they can get a high-paying job at one of these businesses that receive these contracts.
Is there a way, Joe, and we've got less than a minute, is there a way that you recommend agencies prioritize maybe one contract or another? Is there any recommendation in that sense?
Absolutely. I think that all of these programs should be viewed in parity with each other. And when an agency has a need to go to the private sector to fulfill a piece of their agency's mission, they first look at small businesses. There more often than not will be capability and capacity within the small business community. They look at the various socioeconomic programs and they pick the one that's right for that agency need, and everyone will get a great outcome.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks very much for coming on the program. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.